There are moments that divide your life into before and after. For Victoria Carson, that moment came at 1:23 a.m. on a Thursday night, when she collapsed on the service entrance of a Brentwood mansion, barely conscious, and whispered through broken lips, "Please, don't send me away." For Tan Young-chul, Korean Mafia boss and master of emotional detachment, that moment came when he asked 4 words that would burn through Los Angeles like wildfire. "Who dared hit you?" Neither of them knew that by sunrise the entire city's underworld would be holding its breath, that 12 men would be dead, that a war would begin over something the criminal world had one sacred rule about. You don't go to war over staff, you replace them. But Tan Young-chul was about to break every rule he'd ever lived by. And Victoria Carson was about to discover that invisibility was an illusion that the most dangerous man she'd ever met had been watching her all along, rewinding security footage of her humming Spanish songs while she worked, memorizing her schedule without meaning to, discovering that somewhere beneath his armor, he was still capable of caring. And in their world, caring was the fastest way to die. Before we step into the night that changed everything, if you can already feel the tension rising between Victoria and Tan, don't slip away now. Hit that like button and subscribe to join our community for more powerful stories of redemption and hidden strength. This story is for everyone who's ever felt invisible. Now, let's go back to 8 months before that fatal Thursday to when Victoria Carson first learned the rules of Tan Young-chul's world. 8 months earlier, Victoria had stepped into the Brentwood estate with $0 in her bank account, expired immigration papers, and a desperation so deep it had its own gravity. The mansion sprawled across 4 floors of Los Angeles luxury, all marble and black oak and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city where she could barely afford to breathe. Chandeliers caught the light like frozen stars. The silence had weight, the kind that pressed against your chest and reminded you that you didn't belong. Her interview lasted 7 minutes. Tan Young-chul sat behind a desk of polished walnut, his presence filling the room despite his stillness. Dark hair, a faint scar cutting across his left jaw, expensive suit that seemed born on his body. His eyes were gray, storm gray. And when they landed on her, Victoria understood why the other maids had looked terrified. He didn't see her. He saw through her, like she was already a ghost. "You understand the rules?" His voice was quiet, controlled, the kind of control that suggested violence lived just beneath the surface. Victoria nodded. She'd been briefed by Rosa, the woman who connected undocumented workers with high-paying, high-risk positions. Never make eye contact. Never ask questions. Never leave anything out of place. If violence occurs in the house, pretend you saw nothing. If immigration raids the property, hide in the panic room and stay silent. The position pays $800 per week, cash, room and board included. You work 6 days, Sunday off. You do not exist outside these walls. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Don't call me, sir. Don't call me anything. Finish your work before I return each evening. Stay out of my sight. He paused, and something flickered across his face. Not quite emotion, but the ghost of where emotion used to live. People who cause problems here don't get second chances. They simply disappear. Are we clear? Yes. He dismissed her with a wave of his hand, already returning to the papers on his desk, erasing her from his awareness as easily as breathing. Victoria took the job anyway, because $800 a week was 3 times what she could make anywhere else. Because her grandmother's heart was failing. Because desperation makes you brave in the most foolish ways. She moved into a converted storage room above the garage 10 by 12 feet, a narrow bed, a single window overlooking the estate's back gardens. She'd slept in worse, survived worse. This was just another kind of war. And Victoria had learned long ago how to make herself small enough to survive. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that on the other side of the estate, in an office she was forbidden to enter, Tan Young-chul had already pulled up the security footage. That he'd already begun watching her in ways he didn't understand and couldn't explain. That 8 months later, when she collapsed on his doorstep bleeding and broken, he would discover he'd been slowly falling for a ghost. But for now, in these 8 months of careful invisibility, Victoria had perfected the art of being nothing. The marble was always cold. That was the first thing she noticed every morning when her fingers touched the countertops, the floors, the banisters that curved through the mansion like frozen rivers. Cold, expensive, imported from Italy according to Lucia. Victoria didn't care where it came from. She only cared that it showed every fingerprint, every speck of dust, every sign that a human had dared to exist in Tan Yong-chul's perfect world. So she cleaned, erased, vanished herself with every swipe of her cloth. The hallways smelled like expensive cologne, something dark and woody that lingered long after Tan had passed through. Victoria had learned to identify his movements by scent alone. If she caught that particular fragrance in the air, she knew to disappear into the nearest room, to make herself small and silent until he'd moved on to wherever men like him conducted their business. Sometimes, late at night when she couldn't sleep, she'd hear sounds from the basement, muffled, terrible, the kind of sounds that confirmed every whispered warning about what happened in this house. The first time she'd heard them, she'd covered her ears and prayed until her knees ached against the hard floor of her storage room. Now, she just turned up the volume on her phone, played her grandmother's favorite songs, pretended the screams were traffic noise from the distant freeway. Survival required selective deafness. Every night before bed, Victoria knelt beside her narrow mattress and counted. Not prayers this time, but dollars. She kept the cash hidden inside a hollowed-out book, a Spanish Bible her grandmother had given her before she left El Salvador. The irony wasn't lost on her. Using holy text to hide blood money earned from cleaning a criminal's mansion, $7,000 earned 1 week at a time, one invisible day after another. She'd arranged the bills by denomination, had memorized the serial numbers on some of them, like they were the names of children. This money was everything. Her grandmother's heartbeat converted into paper and ink. $8,000 more. 2 months of work if nothing went wrong. If she wasn't fired. If she wasn't deported. If Tan Yong-chul's world didn't swallow her whole before she could save the only person who'd ever loved her. The other maids avoided her. Not out of cruelty, but out of survival. Lucia had explained it on Victoria's second day. We don't form friendships here. Loyalty to each other looks like conspiracy to Mr. Tan. The last 2 girls who were seen talking too much during work hours, both gone within a week. So Victoria worked alone, ate alone, existed alone in a mansion filled with people who'd learned that invisibility was the price of survival. But she had her small rebellions, her tiny acts of humanity that no one saw, or so she thought. She hummed while she worked, old Spanish songs her grandmother used to sing while cooking, songs about heartbreak and resilience and women who survived men who thought they were gods. The acoustics in the East Wing were beautiful, and sometimes Victoria would close her eyes while dusting and let her voice fill the empty hallways. She kept her phone tucked in her pocket, and during her 15-minute breaks, she'd scroll through photos of her grandmother. Pictures from before the illness had carved her down to bone and determination. Her abuela smiling in her garden in San Salvador, hands covered in soil, surrounded by the flowers she loved more than anything except Victoria. Sometimes Victoria would smile at those photos, and for just a moment, the loneliness would recede enough to breathe. She never knew that 3 floors away Tan was rewinding security footage, watching her smile, watching her hum, watching her be human in a house where humanity was contraband. The text came on a Tuesday morning at 6:47 a.m. Victoria was in the kitchen, stealing coffee before the cook arrived, when her phone vibrated against her hip. She almost didn't check it. Communication from El Salvador usually came at night when the hospital staff changed shifts. But something made her look. The message was from Dr. Reyes, her grandmother's cardiologist. Victoria, your grandmother's condition has deteriorated significantly. We need to schedule the surgery within 2 weeks or we'll have to stop treatment. The $8,000 remaining balance must be paid before we can proceed. Please contact me urgently, Dr. Reyes. Victoria read it 3 times, then a 4th. The words didn't change. 2 weeks. She had 2 months' worth of work to do in 2 weeks. It was impossible. Mathematically, financially, physically impossible. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped her phone into the coffee she'd just poured. The expensive Colombian blend Tan preferred, imported, and ground fresh each morning. She watched the dark liquid ripple in the cup, distorted reflections of the kitchen lights dancing across the surface. 2 weeks. Thursday was her day off, the only day she was allowed to leave the estate grounds. She could go to the hospital in Koreatown that coordinated international wire transfers. Could beg Dr. Reyes for more time. Could figure out how to earn $8,000 in 14 days when earning it in 60 had seemed like a miracle. Victoria set down the coffee cup with trembling hands and made a decision. Thursday. She'd handle this Thursday. She'd find a way. She always found a way. She had no way of knowing that this Thursday, November 16th, her scheduled day off would be the last time she'd walk through Los Angeles as an invisible woman. By sunrise Friday, the entire city's underworld would know her name. And the man who'd been watching her in silence for 8 months would discover that caring for her was the most dangerous thing he'd ever done. Tan Yong-chul's office existed in perpetual twilight. Heavy curtains blocked the Los Angeles night, and the only illumination came from the wall of security monitors casting their cold blue glow across polished mahogany and leather. 12 screens. 12 different angles of his estate. 12 windows into a world he controlled with absolute precision. He should have been focused on the quarterly reports spread across his desk. Numbers that represented territory, product movement, profit margins that would make legitimate businessmen weep with envy. The Rising Dragon Triad had been testing boundaries for months, and the Council of Elders in Seoul was growing impatient with his handling of the situation. But his eyes kept drifting to Monitor 7, the kitchen. She was there again. Victoria. The ghost who'd somehow become the only real thing in his manufactured world. Tan's finger hovered over the keyboard, then pressed rewind. He'd watched this particular footage 17 times in the past week. Victoria arranging white roses in a crystal vase, her lips moving silently. He'd enhanced the audio days ago. Knew she was humming a Spanish song, something about women and survival, and the men who underestimated them both. He watched her smile when she got the arrangement just right. A genuine smile, the kind that reached her eyes and transformed her entire face. When was the last time he'd seen something genuine? When was the last time he'd felt something that wasn't calculated, strategic, weaponized? Tan closed that feed and opened another. Monitor 3. Victoria's small room above the garage, time-stamped 10:34 p.m. from 2 nights ago. She was kneeling beside her bed, hands clasped, lips moving in prayer. He couldn't hear the words, but he'd memorized the ritual. Every night. Same time. Same desperate faith in something he'd stopped believing in when his mother swallowed sleeping pills and never woke up. His mother had believed in prayer too. Had believed in love, in attachment, in the dangerous fiction that caring for someone could save you instead of destroy you. Tan's hand moved to his desk drawer, unlocked it. Inside, beneath insurance documents and property deeds, was a letter yellowed with age. His mother's last note, written in Korean characters he'd memorized but never understood. Yong-chul, my son. In this world of monsters, I tried to remain human. That was my mistake. Don't make the same one. Survive. Even if survival means forgetting how to feel. He'd been 11 years old when he found her. 19 years since he'd decided she was right. So why was he watching a maid hum Spanish songs at 11:47 p.m. on a Wednesday? Why had he memorized her schedule: 5 a.m. wake, 5:30 a.m. start work, 3 p.m. finish, evenings spent in her room counting money she thought no one knew about? Why did his chest tighten when he watched her smile at photos of an old woman who was clearly dying? The answer terrified him more than any rival ever had. Monitor 12. The garden. 4 months ago. This was the footage that had started everything. Victoria kneeling in the grass, her work uniform dirty, hands cupping an injured bird. She'd torn strips from her own shirt to bandage its wing, whispering to it in Spanish soft, gentle words that the enhanced audio had captured. Then she'd released it, watching it fly away with an expression of such pure joy that Tan had felt something crack inside his carefully constructed armor. He'd watched that footage 38 times. 38 times, trying to understand why this woman, this undocumented immigrant, this ghost in his house made him remember what it felt like to be human. The office door opened without warning. Minjun entered, tablet in hand, his expression the careful neutrality of a man who'd learned to survive by reading his boss's moods. The Rising Dragon situation is escalating, Minjun said, his eyes flicking briefly to the monitors. To Monitor 7, where Victoria was now wiping down counters. They've been moving product through Koreatown, testing our response time. The elders are expecting a firm answer by week's end. Tan forced his attention away from the screens. What kind of answer are they expecting? The kind written in blood. Minjun paused, his gaze returning to Monitor 7. You've been distracted lately. The men have noticed. There it was. Not quite a threat, not quite advice. The careful dance of a second-in-command reminding his boss that weakness gets you killed in their world. I'm handling it, Tan said, his voice cold enough to end the conversation. But Minjun didn't move. Your father was distracted once. By a woman. It cost him everything. You remember what happened. Tan's jaw tightened. He remembered. His father, beaten to death in a territorial dispute he'd been too distracted to see coming. His mother, destroyed by grief, unable to survive in a world that punished attachment. Get out, Tan said quietly. Minjun left without another word. Alone again, Tan stared at the monitors. At Victoria finishing her work, unaware that she was being watched. Unaware that she'd become the most dangerous thing in his life. More dangerous than the Rising Dragon Triad. More dangerous than ambitious lieutenants. More dangerous than the elders in Seoul who would eliminate any weakness they perceived. In his world, caring was the fastest way to die. Tan closed the surveillance feed with deliberate finality. He pulled up his calendar and began scheduling meetings. Thursday, wall-to-wall. Business in Koreatown. Meetings with distributors. Territory assessments. He'd stay away from the estate during her working hours. Would eliminate this distraction before it eliminated him. By the time he was done, his entire Thursday was blocked out. He wouldn't be home until midnight at the earliest. He had no way of knowing that his absence on Thursday would be the one thing that made her vulnerable. That the decision meant to protect himself would be the reason he'd almost lose the only person who'd made him feel human in 20 years. Los Angeles at dawn was a different city. Victoria stepped through the estate's service gate into air so cold and sharp it hurt to breathe. The sky was that particular shade of blue-black that comes just before sunrise, and the streets were empty except for delivery trucks and the desperate. She pulled her work jacket tighter, the one with Tan's family crest embroidered on the chest, a stylized tiger wrapped around Korean characters. Required uniform for all household staff. She'd always hated wearing it outside the estate, hated how it marked her as belonging to something dangerous. But Lucia had been clear. Wear it or don't leave the property. Today, Victoria barely noticed. Her mind was locked on numbers. $8,000. 2 weeks. Impossible. The bank in Koreatown that coordinated international wire transfers didn't open until 9 a.m. She had 3.5 hours to kill, so she walked. Past sleeping houses in Brentwood, down into the valley where Los Angeles showed its real face, the one without marble countertops and imported cologne. By 9 a.m., she was filling out paperwork with shaking hands. By noon, she was arguing with a clerk about why the wire transfer to El Salvador had failed. By 3 p.m., she'd been passed to 4 different people, each one asking for documents she didn't have, proof she couldn't provide. I'm sorry, the final clerk said, not sounding sorry at all. Without proper identification, we can't process international transfers over $5,000. It's federal law. Victoria wanted to scream, wanted to explain that federal law was killing her grandmother. Instead, she nodded, collected her paperwork, and walked back into the November afternoon with the same $7,000 she'd arrived with. By 8 p.m., she was in Koreatown, at the market where immigrant workers shopped without scrutiny. She bought rice, beans, instant coffee, things that would last, that would let her save every possible dollar. The total came to $23. She paid cash and started walking. The bus would cost $2.75. Nearly $3 that could go toward her grandmother's surgery. Victoria looked at the dark streets stretching back toward Brentwood and made a decision. 3 miles. She'd walked farther in El Salvador, running from the gang members who'd murdered her parents. She could walk 3 miles. The temperature dropped as night deepened. Victoria's breath came out in visible puffs, and her thin jacket did nothing against the cold. Her feet ached. Her back ached. The grocery bags cut lines into her palms. But she kept walking, counting steps instead of dollars, focusing on movement instead of the impossibility crushing her chest. By 9:47 p.m., she was exhausted enough to make a mistake. The alley behind the closed Korean restaurant was a shortcut she'd taken before. It cut 15 minutes off the walk, came out near a bus stop that would take her the final mile home. She'd save the bus fare and still arrive before midnight. Victoria turned into the alley. 3 men emerged from the shadows like smoke taking form. They spoke Mandarin, but Victoria understood the universal language of violence. She saw it in their stance, in the way they fanned out to block both exits. She'd seen it before, in El Salvador, in the seconds before her world had burned. One of them pointed at her jacket. At the crest. His eyes widened with recognition, then narrowed with purpose. "Tell your boss," he said in broken English. "The Rising Dragon remembers." Victoria opened her mouth to explain she was nobody, that she just cleaned floors, that she didn't even know what the Rising Dragon was. The first punch caught her across the cheekbone. Her vision exploded white, then red. She hit the ground hard, grocery bags spilling, rice scattering across filthy concrete. The methodical violence that followed was designed to send a message. They cracked her ribs with practiced efficiency, split her lip, left bruises that would bloom purple and black across her arms, her face, her soul. They took her phone, her money, her jacket, the one with Tan's crest, the trophy they'd come for. Then they left her bleeding in the alley like trash. Victoria lay there, her body screaming. In her mind, images flashed. Her grandmother's smile, her parents' bodies in the street, the storage room above Tan's garage that was the closest thing to home she had left. She prayed. Not for herself, she'd stopped praying for her own salvation years ago. She prayed that her grandmother would live long enough for someone else to help her, that someone would find her body, and at least send word back to El Salvador. That death, when it came, would be quick. An hour passed, maybe more. Victoria couldn't tell anymore. But slowly, painfully, she realized she was still breathing. And if she was breathing, she could move. The 3-mile crawl back to the estate took her until 1:23 a.m. She couldn't go to a hospital. Hospitals meant questions, police, immigration. She couldn't call anyone, they'd taken her phone, and she had no one to call anyway. She could only go back to the one place that had sheltered her, even if that shelter came with its own dangers. Victoria collapsed on the service entrance steps, her vision tunneling. Above her, the security light flickered on, harsh and white. 2 hours earlier, Tan Yongchul couldn't focus at his meeting. He sat at the head of a table in a private room above a restaurant in Koreatown, surrounded by distributors discussing territory adjustments and profit margins, numbers that should have commanded his full attention. Numbers that represented power, control, the empire he'd built on calculated violence and emotional detachment. But his hand kept moving to his phone, checking the time. 11:34 p.m., 11:41 p.m., 11:49 p.m. Across the table, one of his men, Park, a veteran enforcer, noticed. Their eyes met briefly, and Tan saw the question there. The concern, in their world, distraction got you killed. Tan forced himself to focus on the speaker, but something felt wrong. A tension in his chest he couldn't name, couldn't rationalize, couldn't dismiss. By midnight, he'd ended the meeting early. His men exchanged glances as he stood, cutting off mid-discussion, offering no explanation. Tan Yongchul didn't explain himself, but he also didn't leave meetings unfinished. Until tonight. The drive back to Brentwood took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of trying to convince himself he was being irrational, that there was no reason for this unease crawling beneath his skin like insects. He parked in his usual spot and walked through the quiet estate. His lieutenants nodded as he passed, their faces carefully neutral. Everyone knew he'd scheduled meetings until midnight. His early return was an anomaly, and in their world, anomalies meant danger. Inside his office, Tan did something he'd never done before. He pulled up the security logs. Not the live feeds he'd sworn to himself he'd stop watching those, but the entry and exit records. Staff movements tracked by the system he'd installed to monitor every breath taken on his property. His eyes found her name immediately. Victoria Carson. Departed, 5:47 a.m. Status, not returned. Tan checked the time, 12:23 a.m. She was always back by 9 p.m. on her days off. Always. He'd memorized her patterns without meaning to, knew her schedule better than his own. She'd left at 5:47 a.m. and hadn't returned in over 18 hours. He told himself there were innocent explanations. She could have decided to stay somewhere overnight, could have missed the last bus, could have... But the wrongness in his chest was growing, spreading, becoming something close to panic. At 1:15 a.m., Tan did something he hadn't done in years. He walked the estate perimeter himself, past the gardens where he'd first noticed her 4 months ago, past the garage with her small room above it, window dark, past the service entrance where staff came and went like ghosts. He was heading back inside when he saw her. Collapsed on the steps, motionless, blood dark against concrete. Tan moved before his mind could process what he was seeing. He dropped to his knees beside her, and something inside him that had been dead for 20 years roared back to life. Her face was destroyed, swollen, bruised, bleeding, her clothes torn, her breathing shallow and labored. He reached for her carefully, and his hands were shaking. When was the last time his hands had shaken? When his mother died? When his father's body was delivered in pieces? "Victoria," he said, his voice foreign to his own ears. Gentle, almost pleading. Her eyes fluttered open barely, unfocused, delirious with pain. "I'm sorry," she whispered through split lips. "I'll clean up. Please don't send me away. Something inside Tan broke, shattered, remade itself into something he didn't recognize. "Who dared hit you?" The question came out quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that came before earthquakes. His men, gathering behind him now, drawn by his absence, would later say they'd never seen that look on his face. Not during interrogations, not during executions, not during the 3-day war that established his territory 5 years ago. It was the look of a man discovering he was still capable of caring, and in his world, that was more terrifying than any enemy. Victoria tried to answer, her words tumbling out broken and desperate. 3 men, Mandarin, an alley in Koreatown. The message: "Tell your boss the Rising Dragon remembers." They'd taken her jacket, the one with his crest. When she lost consciousness, Tan stood perfectly still for 30 seconds. Then he lifted her in his arms, refusing the help his men offered, and carried her inside. "Call Dr. Yoon," he ordered. "Now." He took her to a guest bedroom on the 2nd floor, laid her carefully on sheets that cost more than she made in a month. His hands were still shaking. Dr. Yoon arrived within 20 minutes, his face betraying nothing as he began his examination. 2 cracked ribs, concussion, internal bruising, lacerations, trauma. Tan stood in the doorway, his knuckles white from gripping the frame. His mind was ice-cold and fire-hot simultaneously. Every moment of the surveillance footage he'd watched played behind his eyes. Her humming, her prayers, her genuine, devastating humanity. This is how my father died, he thought. Distracted. Caring about the wrong thing. This is how my mother lost everything. This is the weakness they warned me about. But standing there, watching Dr. Yoon work to save a woman who'd been nothing more than a ghost in his house 8 months ago, Tan realized he didn't care about the warnings anymore. Minjun arrived, took one look at Tan's face, and understood that something fundamental had changed. "Mobilize everyone," Tan said. "I want names, locations. Anyone connected to the Rising Dragon Triad in Los Angeles. I want them found. I want them brought to me. And I want it done before sunrise." Minjun hesitated. "All of this for every one of them." The lieutenants assembled in the hallway exchanged glances. In their world, you didn't go to war over staff. You replaced them. But Tan Yong-chol had just forgotten every rule he'd ever lived by. By 2 a.m., 12 teams were mobilized across Los Angeles. As Victoria moves from the shadows of the mansion into the center of Tan's dangerous world, we're reminded that no one is truly alone. We'd love to know who is traveling this emotional path with us today. Drop a comment and let us know where in the world you're watching from. At 2:15 a.m., the surveillance footage came through crystal clear. 3 faces, captured by a camera outside a closed Korean restaurant in Koreatown at 9:43 p.m., enhanced, identified. Cross-referenced with known associates of the Rising Dragon Triad. Tan stood in his office, surrounded by men who'd learned to read violence the way others read books. On his screen, the 3 men cornered Victoria in the alley. He watched her mouth move, pleading, probably, explaining she was nobody. Then the first punch landed. Tan's jaw tightened, but his voice remained perfectly controlled. "I need names now." "Chen Wei, Danny Lau, Michael Zhang," his intelligence officer reported. "Low-level enforcers. The warehouse in Vernon is their usual meeting point. How many others will be there?" "At this hour? Maybe 6, 7 total." Tan reached for his jacket. The room went silent. "Boss," Minjun said carefully. "You haven't done field work in 4 years. Let me handle this." "No." That single word carried enough weight to end the discussion. Tan Yong-chul was going hunting, and everyone in that room understood that something fundamental had shifted in their world. At 2:47 a.m., in Vernon Warehouse. The building was exactly what Tan expected. Corrugated metal, minimal lighting, the kind of place where illegal business happened because no one bothered to look. His team moved with practiced silence, cutting power, blocking exits, turning the warehouse into a tomb before anyone inside realized they had visitors. Tan entered through the main door. No stealth, no subtlety. He wanted them to see him coming. 9 men total. Card game interrupted. Guns reaching for holsters too slowly. Because who expects a Korean mafia boss to personally handle street-level enforcement? His eyes swept the room and locked on a hook by the door. Victoria's jacket. The tiger crest. Bloodstained. Something in Tan's chest ignited. The violence that followed was precise. Surgical. His men had seen him kill before. It was how he'd built his reputation, but never like this. Every movement was controlled, but behind his eyes burned something they'd never seen. Not rage. Something colder. Something that made rage look merciful. Chen Wei gone first. Danny Lau second. Michael Zhang tried to run and made it 6 feet. By 3:20 a.m., 9 bodies decorated the warehouse floor, and Tan stood holding Victoria's jacket, his hands steady despite the blood covering them. "Clean this," he told his team, "and find me their supervisor." Back at the estate, Dr. Yoon worked with the efficiency of someone who'd spent decades asking no questions. He cataloged injuries in clinical terms while Lucia, the house manager, held Victoria's hand. 2 cracked ribs, concussion moderate, internal bruising consistent with repeated impact, lacerations requiring stitches. She's lucky, a few inches different, and we'd be discussing organ failure. Lucia had worked for the Tan family for 15 years. She'd seen violence, had cleaned blood from marble, had learned not to care about staff who came and went like seasons. But something about Victoria's broken whispers, "Abuela, need money, please," made her grip the girl's hand tighter. In the hallway, her phone buzzed. A text from Min Jun. 9 down. He's going to the next location. This is getting out of control. Lucia looked at Victoria's bruised face and thought, no, this is finally in control. For the first time in 4 years, their boss was feeling something real, even if that something might destroy them all. At 4:30 a.m., the Rising Dragon's mid-level enforcer, a man named Tommy Zhao who coordinated operations across 3 blocks of Koreatown, woke to find Tan Yong-chul sitting in his bedroom. "The 3 men who attacked my staff tonight," Tan said conversationally. "They reported to you." Tommy's hand moved toward the nightstand. Tan's gun was faster. "I'm going to ask you once. Who gave the order?" "Man, I don't know what you're—" The gunshot was precise, non-lethal. Tommy's scream was muffled by Tan's hand over his mouth. "Who gave the order?" 5 minutes later, Tan had names. Locations. The entire chain of command that had decided hurting his staff was an acceptable message. Tommy Zhao didn't survive the conversation. At the estate, Victoria's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and desperate. "My phone. Need to call." "Grandmother." Lucia leaned close. "Shh. Rest now. Everything's being handled." "The money. I lost the money. Mr. Tan is taking care of everything." Victoria's eyes widened briefly, confusion mixed with terror before consciousness slipped away again. In his office, Min Jun coordinated updates with growing dread. The body count was at 12. 12. For a maid. The elders in Seoul would hear about this by sunrise, and when they did, questions would be asked that had no good answers. He pulled out his phone and typed a message he hoped he wouldn't regret. "Elder Kim. Urgent situation in Los Angeles. Tan has initiated unauthorized action. Recommend immediate intervention." The response came within minutes. "Observing. Report every hour." Minjun closed his eyes. He just set events in motion that couldn't be stopped. Better to act now than wait for the inevitable collapse. At 5:45 a.m., the package arrived at the Triad leader's private residence in Monterey Park. Inside, Victoria's jacket. The tiger crest now decorated with the blood of 12 men. The accompanying note was written in Korean and Chinese. "Touch what's mine again, and I'll dismantle your entire organization." This was mercy. Test me again, and learn what justice looks like. TYC. At 6 a.m., sunrise painted Los Angeles in gold and pink. Tan stood watching. His hands were steady, his breathing controlled. Inside his chest, his heart beat with the same precision it always had. But he'd just committed the unforgivable sin of his world. He'd let emotion dictate business. Had gone to war over a woman he'd never even had a real conversation with. Had painted a target on himself and on her that would draw attention from Seoul, from rivals, from everyone who understood that caring was weakness. He didn't regret it. That realization was more terrifying than any enemy he'd ever faced. Behind him, Minjin appeared in the doorway. It's done. 12 confirmed. The Rising Dragon has received your message. And Seoul? They'll know within the hour. Tan nodded slowly. He'd crossed a line he could never uncross. In the bedroom down the hall, Victoria Carson was beginning to wake, with no idea that the man who'd barely acknowledged her existence had just gone to war for her. And in Seoul, a phone was ringing with news that would seal both their fates. Pain woke Victoria before consciousness did. Her ribs screamed with every breath. Her face felt like broken glass beneath swollen skin. Even her eyelids hurt when she tried to open them against sunlight filtering through gauze curtains. This wasn't her room. Panic cut through the fog of painkillers. Her storage room above the garage had one small window, a narrow bed, walls she could touch from both sides. This room was vast, all cream-colored walls and soft sheets that felt like clouds against her skin. She tried to sit up. Her body refused, sending lightning bolts of agony through her ribs. Easy, a man's voice, calm and clinical. You have 2 cracked ribs. Moving too quickly will make it worse. Victoria's eyes focused on an older Korean man in wire-rimmed glasses, setting down a medical bag. Dr. Yoon, though she didn't know his name yet. Where am I? Her voice came out broken, unfamiliar. Mr. Tan's estate. You're safe. Safe. The word felt foreign. Victoria looked down at herself, soft pajamas she'd never seen before, her arms wrapped in clean bandages. Someone had dressed her, cleaned her, cared for her wounds. I need to work. She tried to swing her legs off the bed. I can't lose this job, I need... The door opened, and Lucia entered carrying a tray of soup. Her usually stern face softened with something close to sympathy. You're not going anywhere, child. But Mr. Tan, Mr. Tan has ordered that you recover here. Your job is secure. You're under his protection now. Victoria stared at her, confusion warring with disbelief. Why would he care? He doesn't even know I exist. Lucia set down the tray and met her eyes with unexpected gentleness. He knows exactly who you are. The words hung in the air like smoke. Before Victoria could process them, Lucia was gone, leaving her alone with impossible questions and soup she was too shocked to eat. Victoria had drifted in and out of consciousness for hours. When she sensed someone in the doorway, her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the afternoon light. Tan Yong-chul stood there, perfectly still, their first real look at each other in 8 months. She'd only seen him twice before, always from a distance, always through her fear. Now, with nowhere to hide, Victoria saw him clearly, the scar cutting across his jaw, the exhaustion carved into his face. Do you remember what you told me? His voice was quiet, careful, not the cold distance she'd expected. Victoria's memory was fragmented pain and pavement, and his face above her, asking that question, who dared hit you? 3 men, she whispered. They said, the Rising Dragon remembers. They took my jacket. Tan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Why did you come back here instead of going to a hospital? The question surprised her. The answer should have been obvious. Because I can't lose this job. My grandmother needs the money. Victoria's voice cracked. And I didn't think anyone would come looking for me anyway. The silence that followed was heavy with something she couldn't name. Tan's gray eyes held hers. And for the first time in 8 months, Victoria felt seen. Not as a ghost. Not as furniture. As a person who mattered. The men who hurt you, he said finally, his voice carrying a weight that made her shiver, won't hurt anyone again. Victoria understood. 12 bodies. She didn't know the number yet, but she understood the meaning. Why? One word. Carrying 8 months of invisibility, of believing she was nothing in his world. Tan was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he did, his voice was raw in a way that terrified her more than his coldness ever had. Because when I saw you bleeding on my doorstep, I forgot every rule I've ever lived by. He left before she could respond, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Victoria lay in that unfamiliar bed, her mind racing. How long had he noticed her? What did his protection mean? And why did the most dangerous man she'd ever met suddenly feel like the only safe thing in her world? 3 floors below, Tan's phone was ringing. Soul calling. The Council of Elders demanding answers for 12 bodies, and a war started over a maid. Neither of them knew that this call would force them into a choice neither was ready to make. If you're feeling what Victoria's feeling right now, that dangerous pull between fear and something else entirely, show this story some love with a like and a comment. Tell me, is Tan's retaliation justified, or has he just made everything more dangerous for Victoria? The answer might surprise you, because what happens next will test everything they think they know about protection, possession, and the fine line between the two. Now, let's see what the Council of Elders has to say about a man who just started a war over a maid. On Friday evening, the video call connected at exactly 7 p.m. 3 faces filled Tan's monitor, each one like a portrait carved from ice. Elder Kim sat center, his white hair immaculate, his expression revealing nothing. To his left, Elder Park, the strategist who'd orchestrated the organization's expansion across 3 continents. To his right, Elder Choi, the enforcer who'd personally eliminated 17 threats to their power over 40 years. These were the men who controlled the Korean Mafia's operations across North America. The men Tan answered to. The men who could end his life with a phone call. Explain the 12 bodies, Tan Yongchul. Elder Kim's voice was soft, conversational. That made it more terrifying. Tan kept his face neutral, his voice steady. The Rising Dragon Triad violated our territory. They attacked my household staff as a message. I responded appropriately. Appropriately. Elder Park leaned forward. You mobilized your entire organization, killed 12 men, delivered a declaration of war to a syndicate we've maintained careful neutrality with for 5 years, over a maid. Over the violation of my territory, Tan corrected. Don't play semantic games with us. Elder Choi's voice cut like steel. We have the reports. You personally led the operation. You haven't done field work in 4 years, but for this girl, you forgot every protocol we've established. Elder Kim raised a hand, silencing the others. His eyes fixed on Tan with the weight of judgment. Your father made this mistake. He cared for a woman, became distracted, vulnerable. It got him killed in a dispute he should have seen coming. Your mother paid for that weakness with her life. Have you learned nothing? The words landed like physical blows. Tan's jaw tightened, but he held his ground. This was about respect. About showing that this was about a girl you've been watching on security cameras for months. Elder Kim's voice remained soft, deadly. Minjun has been keeping us informed. We know about your distraction. We know she's recovering in your home, in a guest suite, receiving medical care that exceeds what you've provided to your own lieutenants. We know you've forgotten the first rule we taught you. Attachment is weakness. The silence stretched, suffocating. You have 1 week, Elder Kim continued, to prove your loyalty to this organization. Demonstrate that this distraction will not compromise your leadership. Or we will find someone who can lead without emotion clouding their judgment. Elder Choi leaned into the frame. Send the girl away. Prove she means nothing. Those are your options. And if I don't? Elder Kim's expression didn't change. Then we will remove the problem ourselves. Both problems. Do you understand? The call ended. Tan sat in the darkness of his office, staring at the blank screen. Behind him, Minjun spoke quietly. They're right, you know. This is how it ends. Care for something, and watch it become a weapon against you. Tan didn't respond. His protection had painted a target on Victoria that was larger than any threat the Rising Dragon could pose. Victoria's ribs still screamed with every movement, but she could walk now. The bedroom felt like a gilded cage, beautiful and suffocating in equal measure. She explored slowly, each step careful. The attached bathroom was larger than her entire storage room. Fresh clothes hung in the closet, sized perfectly for her. Someone had been paying attention. On the nightstand, she found a tablet, left behind accidentally or intentionally. Victoria's finger hovered over the screen, then pressed. It unlocked immediately, no password. The screen showed a file directory. Security footage archive. Her heart hammered as she opened it. Hundreds of files. Thousands. All time-stamped and dated. She scrolled, her breath catching as she recognized locations. The kitchen, the garden, the hallways she cleaned daily. Some files were marked with stars. She opened one. Herself. 3 months ago. Humming while arranging flowers. The camera angle suggested the footage had been zoomed, enhanced. Someone had watched this, rewind it, studied it. Another starred file, her nightly prayer ritual, shot through the window of her storage room. Her most private moment observed. Another, the bird incident from 4 months ago. The moment she'd bandaged its wing and released it. The camera had captured her smile, her whispered prayer in Spanish. Victoria's hands trembled. Violation warred with something more complicated. He'd been watching her, for months. Had seen her when she'd believed herself invisible. He saw me, she whispered to the empty room. The realization was terrifying and intoxicating in equal measure. Victoria found him in his office, the door half open, his back to her as he stared at blank security monitors. I saw the footage, she said. Tan went perfectly still. Slowly, he turned to face her. You've been watching me, she continued, stepping into the room despite the pain. For months. Yes. No denial, no explanation, just honest admission. Why didn't you ever speak to me? The question came out smaller than she intended. 8 months. You watched me on cameras, but you never. Why? Tan's control cracked, just slightly. Because I knew if I started, I wouldn't be able to stop, and I can't protect what I care about. My world destroys everything I love. Then why protect me now? Because protecting you and walking away is impossible. His voice was raw, stripped of armor. And that impossibility might cost us both everything. The council has given me a week to prove you mean nothing, to send you away. If I don't, they'll kill us both. Victoria should have been terrified. Should have run. Should have taken the escape he was offering. Instead, she felt seen for the first time in her life. This dangerous man who'd killed 12 people for her, who'd watched her pray and hum and smile when he thought she didn't know he saw her. The real her. Not the ghost, not the maid. Her. Her grandmother was dying. She was developing feelings for a criminal who'd put her in more danger than the gang members who'd murdered her parents. Every rational thought screamed that this was wrong. But standing in that office, facing a man who'd broken every rule of his world because he couldn't bear to see her hurt, Victoria made a decision that would seal both their fates. She stepped forward, closing the 8 months of distance he'd maintained, and asked the question that would shatter the last of his control. What if I don't want you to walk away? The question hung between them like a live wire. Tan's carefully maintained control fractured. Victoria watched his hands clench, his jaw tighten, watched him physically fight against something that wanted to break free. You don't understand what you're asking. His voice was strained, desperate. In my world, caring about someone is painting a target on them. I've already made you visible to people who will use you to destroy me. Victoria took another step closer, ignoring the pain screaming through her ribs. I've been a target my whole life. Gang members killed my parents in front of me. I'm undocumented in a country that wants to deport me. I work for a criminal to save my dying grandmother. You didn't make me vulnerable, Tan, you just made me visible. The words struck him like physical blows. For 8 months, he'd watched her survive with a strength he'd mistaken for fragility. The council has given me 1 week, he said finally. 1 week to prove you mean nothing. If I can't, they'll eliminate us both. Victoria's response shocked him. No fear, no panic, just cold pragmatism he recognized from his own survival instincts. Then we have 1 week to figure out how to survive this together. By Saturday morning, Minjun stood in Tan's office, his expression hovering between disbelief and fury as Victoria outlined her proposal. You want to use her as an intelligence asset? Minjun's voice dripped with contempt. She's a maid who got beaten in an alley. What could she possibly— I grew up in gang territory, Victoria interrupted, her voice steady despite her bruised face. In El Salvador, I learned to navigate between MS-13, Barrio 18, and corrupt police. I know how to be invisible in communities your organization can't touch. Immigrant workers see everything: who's moving product, who's talking to police, who's planning what. We have networks you don't know exist. Tan leaned back in his chair, studying her with new eyes. Explain. Your organization is visible. Everyone knows who you are, who works for you. That means whole communities shut down when your people show up. But me? She gestured to herself. I'm just another undocumented worker. I can go places, hear things, gather intelligence from people who would never talk to you. The logic was sound. Dangerous, but sound. You've been making this about protecting me, Victoria continued, meeting Tan's gaze. What if we make it about me being useful to your organization? Prove to the council I'm an asset, not a weakness. Minjun's laugh was bitter. The council doesn't care about assets. They care about control, about rules. And the rule is simple. No attachments. Then we change the rule, Victoria said simply. The room fell silent. In their world, you didn't change rules. You followed them, or you died. But Tan was already considering it. Already calculating odds, strategies, possibilities. It's a death sentence, Minjun warned. For both of you. We're already sentenced, Tan replied. This is our appeal. They worked through the night, Tan teaching Victoria the landscape of Los Angeles's underworld. Territory maps spread across his desk, color-coded by organization, by product, by power. The Rising Dragon controls these 6 blocks in Chinatown, he explained, his finger tracing streets. But here, he pointed to a cluster of buildings, there's a textile factory where workers are mostly Latina, your community. Victoria leaned close, studying the map. Her shoulder brushed his, neither moved away. I know someone who works there, she said quietly. Rosa. She's the one who connected me to this job. Can you trust her? In my world, trust is all we have. Tan found himself smiling, actually smiling at the irony. In his world, trust got you killed. His men, watching from the hallway, exchanged shocked glances. They'd never seen their boss smile. Never heard him laugh, which he did an hour later when Victoria described the elaborate code undocumented workers used to warn each other about immigration raids. We use everything, she explained, touching his hand to emphasize her point. Casual, unafraid. Bird sounds, specific flowers in windows, even the way laundry is hung. You've built a network based on fear. We've built one based on survival. Tan stared at her hand on his, feeling something crack further in his chest. He was training her to be valuable to his organization, which made her more of a target, but it was the only way to keep the elders from killing her. The contradiction was maddening. You're falling, he said quietly, more to himself than to her. So are you, Victoria replied. On Sunday evening, the news came through Minjun's network. The Rising Dragon Triad had allied with 2 other Chinese syndicates. Tan's overreaction had triggered exactly what the council predicted: instability, alliance shifts, potential war. This is exactly what the elders said would happen, Minjun reported, his voice tight with vindication. Your distraction is weakening us. The Chinese organizations smell blood. Before Tan could respond, gunfire cracked through the estate. He moved on instinct, covering Victoria's body with his own as bullets shattered the office window. The attack lasted 30 seconds, a guard on the payroll of rivals, eliminated by Tan's security before he could do real damage. But the message was clear. Victoria was a target now, and Tan's protection was proof of his compromise. You see, Minjun said after the chaos settled, this is what caring costs. On Monday morning, Victoria stood in the estate's garage, dressed in clothes that made her look like any other worker heading to a morning shift. A wire hidden under her shirt, a phone with direct access to Tan's security team, and fear that made her hands shake. If anything happens to you, Tan started, then you'll burn the city down. Victoria interrupted. I know, but I'm not your weakness, Tan. I'm the only person who's ever made you remember you're human. Don't let them take that away. She turned to leave, and Tan grabbed her hand. Victoria, I know, she said softly, meeting his eyes. I know. She didn't say what they both felt. Words would make it real, and reality was already too dangerous. Victoria walked out into the Los Angeles morning, and Tan realized with crystal clarity that he was completely in love with a woman who might not survive the week. As Victoria walked into danger wearing a wire and carrying information that could save or destroy them both, Tan made a decision that would change everything. He called Sol and requested an audience with the Council of Elders. Not to defend himself, not to apologize, but to do something no one in the organization's history had ever attempted to challenge the one rule that had governed their world for generations. And that night, while Victoria gathered intelligence that would prove her value, Tan was preparing to risk everything on a gamble that would either set them both free or destroy them entirely. On Wednesday morning, Victoria returned to the estate as dawn broke over Los Angeles, exhaustion carved into every line of her body. Her third intelligence run in 72 hours, her third success. Tan met her at the service entrance, the same steps where he'd found her bleeding 6 days ago, a lifetime ago. 2 shipments intercepted, she reported quietly, handing him a burner phone with photos, names, locations. And I found your leak. One of your drivers has been feeding information to the Rising Dragon for 3 months. 3 informants identified, 2 rival operations dismantled, intelligence his own organization couldn't have gathered in 6 months. She'd proven invaluable. And the council was still demanding a final answer. Sol called, Tan said. They want to see us, both of us, Thursday morning. Victoria met his eyes. Then I guess we're going to Seoul. Thursday morning in Seoul. The council chamber existed in a building that looked like any other corporate office from the outside. Inside, it was a throne room disguised in modern architecture. 3 men sat behind a curved table of polished obsidian. Elder Kim, center. Elder Park, left. Elder Choi, right. 30 years of combined power that controlled an empire built on fear and blood. Victoria sat beside Tan, scandalous, unprecedented. Staff never attended these meetings, but Tan had insisted, and the elders had allowed it. That allowance felt like a trap. We gave you 1 week to prove the girl was meaningless. Elder Kim began, his voice soft and deadly. Instead, you've integrated her into operations. You've made her visible to every rival who wants to hurt you. Explain. Tan stood. Victoria felt the shift in his posture, not submission, but challenge. I'm not here to prove she's meaningless, he said clearly. I'm here to prove that the rule itself is wrong. The silence that followed was absolute. You taught me that attachment is weakness, Tan continued. That caring makes you vulnerable. That love destroys leaders. But you're wrong. Elder Park's eyes narrowed. Careful, Tan Yongchul. Men have died for less bold statements. Then kill me for this one. Our organization has been in decline for a decade. We're losing territory to smaller, more agile groups. We're losing loyalty young soldiers abandon us monthly. We're losing the next generation who see nothing worth dying for in what we've become. We've built an empire, Elder Choi started. We've built a machine, Tan interrupted. An empire built on fear. But fear without purpose is just cruelty. You want to know why soldiers are abandoning us? Because we've forgotten how to be human. We've become machines that consume and destroy, and machines break down. Victoria felt all eyes turn to her as she stood. She shouldn't speak. Every instinct screamed silence. But Tan had risked everything for her. She could do no less for him. In El Salvador, she said, her voice steadier than her hands, the gangs that lasted longest weren't the cruelest. They were the ones that protected their communities. That gave people something to belong to besides fear. MS-13 is brutal, but they offered identity when people had nothing. You've taken away identity and left only violence. And what would you have us become? Elder Kim asked, his tone unreadable. A charity organization? I'd have you become what you were meant to be, Tan said. Protection that actually protects. Power that builds instead of only destroys. You can kill me for caring about her. But that won't stop what's already happening. Your soldiers saw what I did for Victoria. Some are terrified. But others are wondering if there's a way to be powerful without being empty. The elders exchanged glances. Then Elder Kim stood. We will deliberate. Wait outside. They sat in silence, Victoria's hand in Tan's, both knowing this could end in execution. If they say no, Victoria whispered, what will you do? I'll walk away from everything, and I'll make sure you're safe. And spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder? Tan turned to face her fully. If it means spending it with you, yes. The words hung between them, the admission neither had spoken aloud until now. I love you, Victoria said simply. Not a declaration, just fact. I love you, Tan replied. In a quiet room in Seoul, waiting to learn if they'd survive the day, they finally named what had been growing between them since the moment she'd collapsed on his doorstep. The elders returned after 30 minutes that felt like 30 hours. In 30 years of leading this council, Elder Kim began, no one has challenged our fundamental structure. Most who tried were eliminated as threats to order. Victoria felt Tan's hand tighten around hers. But most were challenging for power. You're challenging for evolution. The pause that followed stopped both their hearts. You have 6 months to prove your theory. Build a territory where protection means community, where loyalty is earned, not bought with fear. If you succeed, we'll consider restructuring the organization. If you fail, the unspoken end hung in the air like a blade. But she cannot remain a maid. Elder Choi added, if she's to be part of this world, she must be recognized as your partner, which means she becomes a target for every rival who wants to hurt you. Can you live with that? Tan turned to Victoria, giving her the out. You can walk away. I'll ensure you're protected. Your grandmother's surgery is paid for. You get documentation. You'll be free. Victoria smiled the same smile he'd watched on security footage for months. I've been invisible my whole life. Maybe it's time to be seen. But I'm not just your partner in this organization, she continued. I'm your equal. If we're rewriting rules, let's rewrite all of them. Tan's smile, the first real smile his men had ever seen, was worth every risk they'd taken. Deal. 6 months. Later. The transformation was visible even from the estate's balcony. Sunrise painted the city gold and pink, and somewhere in those streets, Tan and Victoria's experiment was changing what it meant to be powerful. Protection rackets that actually protected businesses. Underground networks helping undocumented workers find legitimate employment. A reputation. Dangerous. Yes, but fair. Victoria's grandmother sat in the estate's garden, healthy and shocked by her granddaughter's transformation from invisible maid to equal partner in an empire, being rebuilt from the inside out. Do you ever regret it? Tan asked, watching the sunrise. Choosing this life? Every day, Victoria answered honestly. But I'd make the same choice every time. Why? Because you asked the right question that night. Not what happened, but who dared. You saw me as a person worth defending before I was useful, before I was valuable. You saw me when I was just a ghost in your house. That's when I knew. Knew what? That the most dangerous man I'd ever met was the safest place I'd ever been. Minjun appeared in the doorway, his respect for Victoria now evident. Another territory wants to meet. They want to learn about the experiment. Victoria took Tan's hand. Ready to change the world? With you, I'm ready for anything. They walked back inside together, partners in a revolution neither expected, proof that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is care. Victoria and Tan proved that the most dangerous man can become the safest place when someone finally chooses to care. If this story touched your heart, please let us know by leaving a comment with your favorite moment or your thoughts on their incredible transformation. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss stories that prove love isn't weakness. It's the most dangerous power of all.